Hello, my name is Dr. MarkAlain Dery, and I am the Medical Director of Infectious Diseases and the Chief Innovation Officer for Access Health Louisiana. Now, I live in New Orleans, and I serve as the co-chair for the ACOI Infectious Diseases Subspecialty Section. Now, you've seen me do these updates for the past few months, and in conjunction with the leadership of the ACOI, I hope that these messages are helping you to keep up with the latest on COVID-19. Now, I know many of you are in the thick of the fight, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of all of us who focus daily on infectious diseases for a living. And of course, certainly on behalf of the ACOI. So, moving together with the ACOI, we will continue to share information as it becomes available, and hopefully some of those hopeful stories as well. Now, speaking of the ACOI, speaking of the AC, it's over here, the AC, all this is reversed. There we go. Now, speaking of the ACOI, are you registered for the virtual convention yet? It's almost here. There'll be some cool opportunities to interact with each other virtually, so you don't want to miss any networking and time to chat and hang out with all of your ACOI buddies. Plus, there will be sessions from many of our members, including this guy right here. So you don't want to miss it. And I think that there's no better or less stressful way to get your CMA credits this year. There's going to be lots of CME. Actually, up to 61A credits that are available. So I look forward to seeing you all there. And so now on to the stories. Let's see what we can do here. All right. Oh, this story. I'm sure you guys heard all about this. DOs versus MDs. All right. Now, the lead doctor treating the president at Walter Reed is a DO, and this has left some misguided dialogue about DOs versus MDs. And with that, I'm glad to see that the mainstream media publishing facts about our profession. The LA Times did a great story based on the facts about the differences, as did USA Today. Now, if you haven't seen those, please take a look at them, and they're listed in the references below. Now, one of the most exciting things about being a DO today is how the profession resonates with our medical students who are increasingly choosing the path of osteopathic medicine. More than 25% of medical students are training in the osteopathic tradition, which is great. 25% of all medical students. I remember I went to DO school, and I think there was 8 schools, and that probably represented maybe 2%, 3% of all medical students. Now we're up to 25%. Now, this is important when you think about the critical shortage of physicians in the country that is only projected to get worse. Now, as reported by the Association of American Medical Colleges, states that by 2025, the gap between our physician supply and demand will range between 34,000 to 88,000. Now, if we can track more young people to become DO because our principles and philosophies align with the way that they want to practice medicine, then I think that osteopathic medicine is answering an important call. And I think that it is super ironic that when our nation faced another crisis similar to what we are facing today, the great influenza epidemic of 1918, osteopathic medicine really began to take off. There was a discussion about the success of osteopathic treatment versus traditional treatment of medicine at the time, and the positive impact that osteopathic treatment had at a time of the influenza pandemic. Now, I will say, that's probably what you learned in medical school. I will ask that you look at my op-ed that I wrote, I think in 2007 or 2008, in which I completely took down that whole idea of how osteopaths treated individuals better than MDs. They talked about these death rates, and I lay it out very logically. You'll find it in the Journal of the American Osteopathic Association. And let me just give you my first argument. Argument number 1: they didn't even know what a virus was at the time, so they didn't know that a virus was causing the flu. And making a definitive diagnosis was absolutely impossible. So I ask that you read I love that we talk about this, but I also ask that you read my takedown of that whole, of this whole idea. You'll find it in op-ed in the Journal of the American Osteopathic Association. If you type in Dery and influenza, I think that'll come up. All right. So now this currently spotlights DOs because we can help educate a population that may not understand the differences. So I see this as a time and an opportunity to advocate for our profession with great, great pride. I remember that when I went to medical school, I chose osteopathic medicine versus allopathic medicine because for me, it was the right thing to do. The philosophy of inside my 23 or 24-year-old mind, the idea of treating the whole patient, and the idea of being able to put your hands on patients and do manipulation was something that really resonated with me. I was interested in infectious diseases, and I loved the idea of potentially stimulating immunity through osteopathic manipulation, which is also a study that I did that was, and you'll find that in lymphology in 2000. It was published in 2000. All right. So let's talk about Regeneron. So what is Regeneron? Now, it certainly isn't time to call Regeneron a cure, but the promises of this drug, which has been making the headline, is something to have some hope in. Now, this is an experimental monoclonal antibody, and it's experimental. So keep in mind that we need to finish clinical trials to truly determine its effectiveness, as it has not yet been approved by federal regulators. So far, the studies have shown that the drug is most effective in patients who had not begun to develop their own immune response. It was developed by a biotechnology company called Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, and it's an artificial antibody cocktail designed to produce resistance to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. It consists of a mixture of actually two monoclonal antibodies. That would be Regen 10933 and Regen 10987. There'll be a test on that, so remember that. The combination of several antibodies is intended to prevent a mutational escape. So now, as you probably already know, it was used on the president this past weekend when he entered into Walter Reed. Now that has led to a demand that is putting the company in a tough spot, as requests are pouring in for early access via the FDA's compassionate use approval process. This compassionate use designation is something used by the Food and Drug Administration, and in certain situations, the FDA does allow companies to provide their experimental drugs to people outside of clinical trials, and this is referred to as compassionate use. But normally, getting access to not yet approved drugs through a compassionate use request can be long and challenging process. So now, ironically, one of the side effects of the drug potentially is shortness of breath and fever. Of course, these are symptoms that are consistent with COVID-19. Because it is only used in clinical trials, it's available at no charge through this compassionate use, but if approved for widespread use, the treatment could cost thousands of dollars, similar to other monoclonal antibody treatments. So I think that we're not ready for prime time. We know that convalescent plasma, remember these are synthetic antibodies, and convalescent plasma had a so-so effect. And remember, convalescent plasma is the part of the blood that gets spun out. The red blood cells get spun out, and what's left over in that plasma, those are the cells of immunity. So those are where the antibodies live. And again, that convalescent plasma that uses human antibodies, previous folks that have survived from COVID, their antibodies. So we'll see if it works. There's been, I think, a couple hundred people that have been in the study so far, and it's certainly very, very interesting, and it's something that we thought we should definitely report on. So last time, I got it wrong. Have you signed up yet for the ACOI conference? I'm going to pretend I know what I'm doing here. So there's lots of CMEs and there's lots of great speakers. All right, so stay on the lookout for our regular updates, and to read more from sources used in this report, go to acoi.org/COVID-19. Together with the ACOI, we will help you have the latest information to help you respond to your patients and stay on top of the crisis. Please, please, always feel free to reach out to me at madery@mac.com. Please stay safe. We can get through this together.